Hi everybody, we're welcoming you to our video. We are going to talk about topic 2, the topic of Orientalism. And first, Maisie is going to give a quick overview, what the main ideas of Orientalism are. Then we're going to talk about an example, which I'm going to explain briefly, and then we have 2 examples and we're going to discuss it on these 2 examples. Yeah.
So we're going to start by it. So first of all, within Orientalism, 2 ideas that stood out to us, which we're going to use in these examples, was the idea of othering, and how Said talks about the creation of a kind of a European identity through the like othering those who aren't within a European identity, and how this has been used to kind of create the idea of a superior European like culture and identity, and how so by the creation of this other, it constructs what we see as the us. And then the second idea that we are going to use is like how this other is essentialized and they're seen as a homogenous group, whereas we see ourselves as like a complex and more diverse group, but the other is just all falls into the same category.
Yeah, so these are, like, in our view, the basic ideas. And the example we're going to use is the New Year's Eve in Cologne. So what happened was in Germany, in the city of Cologne in 2015-2016, the new year, there was mass sexual harassment in front of the Cologne Cathedral and the central station in Cologne. Also in other cities, but this was the biggest case and, you know, the most prominent one. So what happened was that there were groups of men, mostly from North African countries, like ganging up in front of the cathedral and in the central station. And then they started, during the night, they started to sexual harass women and also pickpocket. And I think more than 1,000 cases have been brought forward to the police of sexual harassment. 3 of them were about rape. So it was a really big thing. And following that, there was a big outrage in the press, and people were talking about women's rights and sexual harassment in general, but then the discussion quickly shifted towards Muslim men, because most men who were the offenders in this case were from North Africa. And then people started to discuss if Islam promotes, sexual harassment, is it a religious thing, is it a cultural thing, and we took 2 specific examples from the Western press to show how people presented this issue or discussed this issue in what we see as a very Orientalist, in a very Orientalist way. So Maisie is going to present the first one.
Okay, so the first example was following the attacks. There was an Algerian journalist called Kamel Daoud who published an article in the New York Times in February 2016, so 2 months after the attacks. And the title of the article was Sexual Misery of the Arab World. So from the beginning of it, you can see it's quite loaded. And Daoud looked at how blamed Arab immigrants for the attacks. And the reason that he gave for the attacks having taken place is that the Arab world is plagued by a sick relationship with women, which then he goes on to say that women are so repressed in the Arab world, and says that they're veiled, stoned and killed, and that women are just victims there. So in Daoud saying just this, you can see that he's generalizing the Arab world as completely the way that women are treated in the Arab world, and he's just generalizing that they're only victims. And then the fact that he says that like the sick relationship with the women, and that like he doesn't interrogate this any further. He just makes this kind of big claim, and generalizes all relationships with women. And like in saying this, he kind of he's othering, and he's constructing like an us who we have like a great relationship with women, and a them who like don't know how to treat women, and the result of that is sexual assault, which you can see it's quite like it's quite like a big claim to make, to say that that's the result of how women are seen in the Arab world. He also goes on to say that Orientalism is usually used to excuse behaviour. Like for example, he says that that it's seen as part of Arab culture to sexually assault women, so that makes it okay. So Dowd sees himself as not an Orientalist because he's arguing that it's not okay just because it's part of Arab culture, but then at the same time he's arguing that it is part of Arab culture. So it's quite a conflicted article.
Yeah, and I think Said would label him as Orientalist because he's looking down kind of to this aspect. But it is interesting how he turns the idea of Orientalism around. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think because he's generalized all Arab men as these men who are kind of like hungry for sex because they have this terrible relationship with women, and so they have to turn to sexually assaulting women because they live in so much sexual misery. And also, I think interestingly that Dowd is an Algerian journalist, but he's seeing the Arab world as this miserable place, and he's othering it, and the article was written in the New York Times, that was quite widely discussed and circulated in Europe also.
Yeah, so he would see himself more, like his us would be the Western world, to use that term.
Yeah. So,
but at the same time, his origin is from what he says is the others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think maybe, so even he is orientalizing, even though he is not, he hasn't got Western origins. Maybe that's...
Yeah, that's a really interesting case.
And then now Lovisa has one.
Yeah, then I'm going to present the other example we found. As I said, it was discussed in the media and also in the European media, but of course also in German media. And there were two papers in Germany publishing pictures. One is a more conservative magazine and one is also conservative newspaper. And what happened was that with these things happening, the far right, or even like more conservative people, I don't even know if I should call them far right, portrayed themselves as speaking for women and portraying themselves as feminists. So that was the us. And then the other would have been the harassing, anti-feminist, anti-women, Arabs or Muslims or whatever category you want to use. So I'm going to show you the pictures. So I'm just going to show you like this. These were the two pictures. Can you see them? Yeah, so what you can see is like women's bodies, and then you have like two different instances of like black handprints. So this example is really ironic because the conservatives were portraying themselves as pro-women and very feminist, but the pictures are very sexist. And then, of course, there's a huge, black handprints. That's very racist, of course. So it was interesting to see how this discussion was turned around and how all of a sudden the conservative men were saying we have to protect our women against the barbaric Muslim or Arab or both men. And then all the discussions that follows were not about, protecting women, but more about, is Islam a religion that promotes sexual harassment? Is this something cultural, which is like a very racist discourse? So that was really a big problem, I think. Yeah. So
it seems like both of the articles are doing the same,
mhm.
comparing us who we treat women well and respect women versus these others who just will do anything to women and don't.
Yeah,
It's
and
a-
then like how feminist are they?
Yeah.
Like if you say our women, yeah, I mean you don't have to add anything to that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So yeah, and oh yeah, what I forgot is that also in Germany and maybe in other places too, I'm not sure. Following this discussion, there was also a generalization, like not only blaming North Africans who were mostly the perpetrators, but like refugees in general. And the police did a lot of controls, and they said, okay, we're controlling North Africans, but they were actually controlling Afghanis and like people from Afghanistan, people from Syria, people from Iraq. And so, yeah, so then there was this whole discussion of racial profiling. Yeah. So in these two cases, yeah, to sum up, we have the othering really clearly.
And also I think the homogenization of the other in both cases, because they're seen in the case that you just talked about, where it's not just North Africans, but actually everybody, they're all seen as the same, and they're all capable of doing the same thing.
Yeah. And also this thing that it's like a cultural aspect, like it's in the culture. So yeah, that's pretty racist.
I think it's quite interesting if that happened to a group of if a group of German men had carried out those assaults, what you would say about them, and how, like, what you would blame for it, and you probably wouldn't blame their culture.
Actually, like, so a lot of responses to this were also that, like, from a more like a liberal or left direction, were that I mean, first of all, it's ridiculous to portray it in this way. And second of all, we have the Oktoberfest in Bavaria, and it's known for, like, sexual harassment is normal there, and it's not talked about, and rape and everything.
Accepted.
It's just accepted. So people don't talk about it. Like, it's just the way it is. So that would be an instance where the us is doing it, but it's like, yeah.
But when that happens, you don't see it.
Yeah, of course. Like, we can rape our women the way we want. You can't do that, kind of, which is of course very like.
Because when someone who's not European does it, they're doing it for everybody who's not European. But if someone European does something,
he has
for
some
themselves
problem, or so he has his individual reason. And then also you have this thing where the group, like the homogeneous group, is seen as barbaric, not in control of their, not civilized because they can control themselves. Like,
they're all out of control and all.
So I think that's a theme that has been very present.
I agree.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're going to say.
I'm going to say thanks for watching.
Thank you for watching. Now we both said it.
Okay. I'm going to
I hope you enjoyed.